So hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. An absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you. How are
Hi,
you today?
hi,
Okay.
Sarah. Very nice to see you.
Maybe you can kick off with a brief introduction to Operation Mincemeat. So for people who don't know anything about it, what can they expect from this film?
Operation Mincemeat is the true story of a long hidden spy deception operation that was only recently discovered in 1996 because MI5 released the records. And so Ben Macintyre, who's written many, many books about World War II and spies, um, got his hands on these records that, if you put them next to me, would stand up tall, 5 feet, 6 feet high. And he took all this information and turned it into, I thought, was just a brilliant book. And now it's a movie, and it's about an operation that really people didn't know about, the true nature of what was actually going on. And it changed
And
the
I just
course of the war.
and what I love about it is there's got this incredible kind of multi-layered nature to it because it seems stranger than fiction, but in some ways it is because it was really inspired by something that someone had pulled from a novel, from a Thompson novel.
Right,
There's all these storytellers in it. And then it was originally a film back, I think, in the 50s,
right.
post-war propaganda film. Then, of course, it's been written, into a book by Ben, and then you've adapted it for the screen. So,
Right.
was that really fascinating to you to like come into that kind of like that web of stories of being told about this, all hooked to this one incident? And how did you come to it first?
Well, I came to it because Malcolm Gladwell had written a piece in the New Yorker about Ben's book right when it was coming out. And he was fascinated, being a kind of overthinker that he is. He was fascinated by the Hall of Mirrors quality of spies, which is they tell so many deceptions that they loop around and quite often don't even know what is real and what is not anymore. And he felt that Ben's book really captured that, which is once you're in the world of spies, you can never actually know what the truth is because there's so much deception going on. And I read Ben's book and thought it was fascinating. I thought that element was wonderful, but I also thought it was funny and I thought it was strange. But I mostly thought it was this incredible Valentine to spy stories and how they have a grip on us. And they have had a grip on us for decades and decades and decades. And what is it about spy stories that we love? And I think that there's a huge romanticism about spies and what they do. And what I loved about this book was that the actual spies were as in love with spy stories as anyone. In fact, many of the people involved in Operation Mincemeat and in deception in World War II ended up being spy novelists, and of course, Ian Fleming being the major one, who was at the center of this story, creating these little fictions, and then he turned out to be a huge writer of spy stories. So I loved it because it was all about, to me, how the romanticism of spy stories has us all in its grip, and why is that? And I think it has to do with daring and well, as we see when Ian Fleming's version of a spy has become this incredible character that has lived on for decades.
In particular, what I like about it as well is you could argue, gosh, there's just been so many films about the Second World War
Yes.
and, kind of exactly what happened and different elements of the story, always hearing different sides. But this, again, feels fresh.
Oh, I'm
And,
so
we're
glad.
not on the front lines, we're not with soldiers, there's not one single hero. It's this kind of, this group of people that are sort of in the shadows and they work as a team and
Right.
they're not doing it for the glory, they're doing it to play their part. So was that also an appeal for you?
Yes, completely. Because I thought one of the things I most loved about this is it's about the unsung heroes. It's the people who actually did change the course of World War II, and they did it in a basement that was depressing and windowless and smoky, and they were not glamorous. And they were actually the ones that were creating a fiction that made the difference. And I loved that. It's the people you never hear about that actually did the work. And and if these records hadn't been released, how we probably wouldn't have known a lot. Not only is it the people who did the work, but the man who was the dead body also would have never been known about. And so now even he gets his due. And I just love yeah, it's like about the regular people that make it happen. I love that.
And from a screenwriter's perspective, it must be one thing to like to write the script, but then to see it come to life with such an incredible team of filmmakers and such an amazing cast must be such a joy. So what did it mean to you, first of all, to have Johm Madden, obviously everyone will know his work very well from Shakespeare in Love and beyond. What was it like working with him as a director?
Well, it was Johm Madden had directed a TV pilot of mine before I got my hands on this book. And I, like every other person in the universe, had madly loved Shakespeare in Love. And so when I read Ben's book, oddly, I thought, the best way to adapt this and turn it into a movie is to kind of do it the same way they did Shakespeare in Love, which of course was about the love of writing and Shakespeare. And this is about the love of spy stories. And I thought, it's not that dissimilar. So I came to John and said, I want you to read this book. What do you think? He was like, well, why did you show me a script? Because I'm not entirely. And so the two of us worked very carefully and closely on this. And the first draft that I did was much funnier because I really responded to that in Ben's book. Ben has a mischievous sense of humor. And this story is so absurd in so many ways. And I loved that. So, but anyway, John and I worked together, and I think we landed on a tone that feels right. Because, of course, it's madcap and lunacy on one hand, but the stakes were so enormous and very real. And so we had to balance that, and that took a while.
And the cast is just so amazing. I feel like it's like a collection of, so many British actors that we've just known to come and love. And then also, sort of newer faces like Johnny Flynn as Ian Fleming. But yeah, particularly at the centre, Colin Firth and Matthew McFadden, they seem I don't know, you wouldn't have thought of putting maybe in a film together, but suddenly it works so well, like kind of the way they play off each other. And that humour and that shift in tone between it being a lot of tension and then them kind of being this, almost like a comedy duo.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful that comes across. Because yes, that was the idea. I mean, it was mad what they were doing. It was such a crazy thing, and the casting. Well, this is one of the joys of working with Johm Madden, who knows everybody, and he and Colin are actually neighbors, and so that worked out beautifully. They've known each other for years, and then Matthew McFadden, who's just brilliant, and even the Chumley family, Charles Chumley's family, who worked with us on this, looked at Matthew's performance and just said, "Oh my gosh, you've just captured the man perfectly."
And then also, the female stars like Kelly Macdonald, she's one of my absolute favourites, and also Penelope Wilton. And do you think it was also interesting that it's true that when you look a lot of the decision makers in that time, I mean, even still to this day, it's very sort of, white males, in a stuffy room, and was it quite, interesting to draw out the strength of those female characters, and actually, even though maybe they wouldn't have been in the decision-making rooms, they played pivotal roles in making things like this happen.
They absolutely did, and certainly World War II, both on this side of the ocean and the other. World War II was an enormous opportunity for women to really pitch in and work, and yes, absolutely, I was really interested in how the women were really instrumental in making much of this happen. And this was a movie, a version of this was a movie in the 50s, and of course women were just not, they didn't really get their due, let's just put it that way. So I was really happy to be able to say, this is how instrumental these women were in making this happen.
There's also this really interesting kind of love triangle, of course, that kind of, between those three characters, Colin Firth and Matthew and Kelly. So maybe you can just talk a bit about that, because maybe it's slightly non-conventional, not just to have, a normal romance story. It's much more complex than that, and maybe doesn't land where people expect it's going to. So, what was the thought behind including that?
Well, it's interesting that the relationship between Jean Leslie and Montague was very real. I mean, it was real in its fictional version. I mean, those are two people who were working on this story and found themselves so caught up in the fictional story of Bill and Pam that they started to act it out themselves, which I found fascinating because that is really a strange kind of path to go down. But it was very real. They would write each other letters. It was like a weird love affair. And we're making a movie, of course. So when I thought, well, what would be interesting Like, what was Charles Chumley making of this as the real man? What was he thinking when he realized that Jean Leslie and Montague were acting out this fiction? And I thought, well, it's not such a stretch to think he might have been also interested in her. He was the unmarried man, after all, and maybe he was the more appropriate choice for her rather than Montague, who was married. So I just thought, I don't think, and I said to Ben, do you think it's strange if we kind of explore this a little bit? Because we can't prove that Chumley had a bit of a thing for Jean, and he said, no, why? Let's try it. Let's see. Because it felt like in the spirit of the thing, especially because so much of this story has to do with deception and people hiding their feelings and their thoughts. And so we thought, yeah, let's push this a little bit.
And what about the look and feel of the film? I mean, obviously, it's so ambitious ever to have to recreate a whole other era. But I love how it doesn't, maybe focus on, too much of the kind of, the bombed out parts of London. We go into the Gargoyle Club, it's sort of, and everyone's wearing and the music, and it's kind of showing us that other side of where people obviously, after years of war, also just wanted to let their hair down and let off some steam. And right. So it really kind of, goes into that side of things too.
No, it really does. And this is one of the things I loved about this, because I did feel like this will be a look at the war that you don't normally see. As you say, all the kind of tropes of the soldiers and the bombs and all that. So one of the things I found so fascinating, I knew that London had blackouts, but I didn't really realize what that meant until I started doing this research. And the notion that you had to walk around during the blackout, if you wanted to see anything, you had to have these flashlights and everybody would point them at the ground. And that's how you sort of moved around. And if you came up to a theater, like they do in the movie, to see all these shows were going on, they were real, but you would come up to a completely darkened theater and you would slip through the door, and then you slip through another door, and then all of a sudden an explosion of light and people and a lobby and everyone getting their seats and their tickets, and it just seemed so crazy but fascinating to me. So we really wanted to show that this is what it was like. All this life was going on, but it was weirdly hidden in this completely blacked out city.
And the extent of the ambition also stretches to, there's all these amazing scenes, even going to Spain, and then,
right.
The submarines, and, what was it like to see what you'd put on a page kind of come to life on that scale?
Well, I mean, I was just the luckiest person on earth. I had John directing, who's brilliant, and then that cast, and then all the production design, the wardrobe, all of it was just absolutely top notch. So it was this stepping into this incredible world, and I was just pinching myself going, wow, this is crazy and wonderful. It was really fun because they did a beautiful job. I mean, I think the movie really does look beautiful and authentic, and so many people put so much effort and time and knowledge and research into every single decision that you see on screen.
And what do you hope people will take away from watching it? Because it does feel like an uplifting story, but like we said at the beginning, not in the sense of like, not everyone has to be, this sort of maverick, on your own hero. It's about friendship, it's about teamwork, it's about, even when things are going wrong, problem solving your way through it and kind of persevering. So,
yeah.
What do you think, what people take away?
I do hope people really look at the story and realize the true heroes are quite often ordinary people. They get no glamour. They don't even quite often get their due, but they feel a sense of duty and a sense of love of country, and they are joined with other people that feel the same way, and they work really hard and they dedicate their lives and their times to making something better, to helping their country in a time of war, to doing the right thing. And I think I do. I think it's a wonderful reminder, especially in the very, very complicated times that we're living in, that ordinary people can make an extraordinary difference, and do. And there are all those people behind the scenes that actually do the work.
And do you think it's interesting, this film landing right now, not only after the pandemic we've all been through, and everyone kind of locked away, and I don't know, like being immersed in a film like this, but also, thinking about what's happening in Ukraine, and the fact that narratives and stories are also things that play out, you know, what's actually happening. Okay, you're getting one report from Russia, you're getting one report from Ukraine. How do we sort through these things and actually know what's going on, and the importance of truth telling? So, you know, does it play out differently perhaps that it's coming out at this moment?
Well, it plays very differently, and I mean, God knows nobody would have wanted this to be so relevant. But in fact, yes, the fact that we're looking at another war in Europe, I mean, it's shocking. And the notion that this movie is all about what story is really being told and where is the truth in it is hopefully just a reminder to look very, very carefully at what is being said, how it's being said, and where might the truth actually lie in these stories. It certainly is a reminder that this stuff is not in our past. It's still happening.
I think that's what I felt when I watched it, because is it easy to maybe sometimes brush these things aside as, oh, that's history, and, you know, that's not part of our culture now, and those things don't happen anymore. And then it's actually, I think everybody is taken aback by the fact that, oh, this is actually happening in our lifetime as well. And that was only really recent history too. And
exactly
the idea that we can't all be complacent either, that we all have a role to play in situations like this.
Oh, absolutely. If I would say anything, it's history matters. It really matters, and it's really important to keep it alive, to know these stories, because they do come around again, and you don't want to be caught flat-footed. You want to have that reference of, oh yes, I see how this fits in the much bigger picture. If you don't know history, you won't even know that there's something to compare it to. So it's really important.
And can you quickly tell us what you're going to be working on next? Have you already got some things you've been working on?
I do. I am. We're in post-production on a movie that I wrote called Cat Person, which is an adaptation of a New Yorker short story that went viral in 2019 or 2017. Excuse me. Either it's been so long, the pandemic has upended everything. But the Cat Person was a short story written by Kristen Rupinian, and it went viral because I think it tapped into something that women have known for a very long time but don't really speak about, which is this notion of not speaking up in situations that are uncomfortable, and it's not a movie about consent or any kind of sexual abuse. It's much more about the everyday sort of encounters that women have, and how for many reasons they've been taught not to actually speak up and say what they're really thinking or what they're really feeling, and as a result, it's just a story of a young girl and a slightly older man who have a disastrous encounter as a result of not being honest and open with each other.
I think I'm out of time, but thank you so much for sharing all that with us. Can't wait for everyone else to see Operation Mincemeat from this Friday. And yeah, of course, your future projects, Cat Person, so I can't wait for that too. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you.